A police officer is stalking me and is begging me to date him, but my friends are calling me awful for not going out with him because it is romantic. 2 months ago, there was a domestic dispute in my building. I was coming home when I noticed 2 police officers waiting for the elevator. I would have waited for the next one, but we only had 2 elevators, and one was broken. I rode up with the officers and was surprised to see that we all got off on the same floor. Mine. The disturbance was in the unit next to mine. I've only lived here for 3 months, so I don't know any of my neighbors. I didn't think too much of it then, so I closed the door to my unit. About 30 minutes later, I heard a knock at my door. It was one of the police officers that I had ridden up with on the elevator. He asked me to open the door, but I was hesitant, so I asked if we could just talk through the closed door. He showed me his badge through the peephole to make me feel safer, but that didn't help. He told me he needed to see my identification because I might witness what occurred in the unit beside mine. I told him I saw nothing, so I wouldn't be a big help. He told me I should talk to him now or go to the police station in the morning, which could take all day. I'm a student. I agreed that I couldn't take a whole day to discuss an incident. He didn't come inside my place. We chatted at my door. He asked me for my ID, so I gave him my driver's license. He wrote down my information, my number, and told me he would be in contact. 2 days later, I spotted him at my building after coming home from class. He asked me how my neighbors were doing, and I said fine and tried to get into my building. He stopped me and said he thought he and I had chemistry the night we met and asked me out. I told him I had a boyfriend, lie, and sidestepped him into my building. The next day, I got a call from my grandmother. She tells me that a nice police officer came by and asked me very personal questions. The person she described sounds exactly like the police officer who asked me out. My license has my grandmother's address. I lived with her before and haven't had time to change it. At this point, I was freaking out. I told her not to talk to him or answer the door if he returned. I was walking home from class 2 weeks ago and jaywalked to get to my building. I hear someone calling my name, so I turn around, and it's the police officer again. He told me he could fine me for jaywalking because it's illegal, but he wouldn't if I went out with him. I told him I was seeing someone again, but he told me my grandmother told him I was single. I told him it was a new relationship so that she wouldn't know. He said he would hold off on the jaywalking ticket, but not for long. It's been a few weeks since that confrontation, but I often see him. I live in a safe neighborhood, but he always seems to be parked near my school or apartment building. I'm on a student visa. I'm Canadian. I can't afford to have a ticket on my record, but I'm also very worried that this police officer will escalate this situation if I don't go out with him. I told one of my closest friends about this, and she told me that what this police officer was doing was romantic and that I was an asshole for not going out with him. Update: from social media accounts, I found 2 other police officers, brother and cousin, who shared the officer's last name, begging me to date him. I first interacted with the police officer in late March/early April, so this happened for a couple of months. Some of you were concerned about my grandmother after the officer visited her. She moved out in May, which is why I moved out. She lives in a senior home hours away from me now, so she's fine. The campus is empty now that the spring semester finishes in May. My friends are gone. I only stayed for the summer because I secured a student research position. I'm kicking myself now for staying, but there was no way I would pass up on this opportunity. The morning, the officer knocked on my door. He kept singing my name while he knocked. Creepy. I didn't answer. He came back a few hours later. I'm ashamed that I hid in my apartment until Monday morning. I was planning on calling the domestic abuse line in my area, but I think his visit frazzled me. He had never gone as far as to knock on my door again after that first night we met. I walked to campus yesterday morning and was still alert and scared. I ran into one of my professors from last semester, and she could see that I wasn't okay, so she took me to her office. It all came tumbling out after that. I told her everything about what had been happening. She was super sympathetic. I told her the officer's name, and she didn't look surprised. According to her, he's done this before to multiple women. Some women have filed complaints, but nothing has happened because his dad is well connected. The officer has a pattern of escalating once complaints are filed. I told my professor I planned on seeking out the victim advocacy group, but she cautioned me against it. When the spring semester ends, many people take the summer off, and the offices are staffed with locals. The sister of the officer harassing me currently works at the one I was thinking of calling. She stayed with me while I called another advocacy group a bit farther out of town. She also connected me to a lawyer just in case, also out of town. The professor got her son to walk to and from campus with me. I felt guilty about that, but he said he would gladly help. My professor told me that the officer targets women who live alone or seem to be alone all the time, which is me this summer.